Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today's webinar is the second in a 5-part series of short 30-minute webinars that go through the entire BNI Connect system from a member standpoint and show you some of the wonderful things that we have available to us just by logging in as a member into BNI Connect. So we started this off with yesterday's webinar where we talked about really how do you fill out your profile and why do you want to fill out your profile and where is it shown and what are some tips and tricks around that. Today what we're going to talk about is kind of the everyday activity that we're all striving to do, which is to pass referrals and to record our thank you for closed business and to record our one-to-one meetings and our CEUs. We're going to talk about how to go and record all of that information in BNI Connect, and hopefully I'll get a chance to show you why it's really important to do that as well. Tomorrow we are going to have another webinar, and tomorrow we're going to talk about the connection. So it's really the how do you use BNI Connect in a bigger sense? How do you reach out into the world of BNI and look for other members around the globe, either because you're looking for somebody's services or you'd like to pass on a referral, or whether you just would like to expand your network. So that's going to be tomorrow's webinar. And then we have another webinar on Thursday where we're going to take a deeper dive into the system and look at some of the tools and reports. We're going to take a week off, and then the following week we're going to talk about the visitor process to wrap up this series. So thank you. I do recognize quite a few names that were on the call with us yesterday, so thank you for coming back again a second time. A couple of very quick housekeeping things for those that this might be your first webinar. First of all, we are recording this webinar. So if you're here with us live today, and today is March 14th, 2017, you have the added bonus that you can ask questions as we're going along. So feel free to submit any questions you would like about BNI Connect. It could be either in the content today, or it could be, completely and totally unrelated. Always happy to answer questions. Although I did mention I do try to keep these to about a half hour for content to make sure that everybody gets on with their scheduled lives as they need to and return those phone calls that I'm sure you'll receive as we are going through the material today. I am always happy to stay here until every single question is answered. So feel free to ask as many questions as you would like. We are recording this, so if you are listening to this webinar in the future, you will have the opportunity to review this. You can share that video. I'm going to host this video in a couple of places on our support site, which is available by clicking that question mark in the upper right-hand corner of BNI Connect. It's right up here in the upper right-hand corner. Oops, I zoomed in a little bit too far there. But up here in the upper right-hand corner, that's where you can find it. And it'll also be on our YouTube channel. So you can find it on our YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. All right, so let's take a look at today's material. Again, we're going to talk about the referral process. So obviously, we're in BNI in order to give referrals, to receive referrals, to build our relationships, to have one-to-ones with people. And one of the accountability things that's here in BNI and that's helped with BNI Connect is that we track all of that stuff that's going on. We track when we show up to meetings. We track whether we're on time or whether you have a substitute. We also track that activity between members. So the one-to-ones, the referrals, the thank you for closed business, and the CEUs. So you can do that. And for 30 years or so, or for 25 years, that was all done on paper. So what would happen is people would fill out a slip, they would bring it to the meeting, and then the vice president would collect up all those slips and take it back to their office, count it all out, and then input it into basically an online spreadsheet. That was great in that it gave us all of our stats and how many referrals we're passing. But with BNI Connect, we can actually do that all electronically, and that accomplishes two things. First of all, it makes our vice presidents much happier. And it makes them happier because they don't have to collect up the slips and bring it back and count it all out, because it will be entered into that spreadsheet automatically by the system. But the more important part is that when we start to collect that information and we put that online in BNI Connect, now we have better reporting as well. So it's not just the statistics. It's not just how many referrals did I pass, or how many referrals did I receive, or how many one-to-ones did I have, but we can then recover the details. Who is passing me the most referrals? Who is providing the most business to my business? Who am I having the most one-to-ones with? Which allows us to really strategize our membership in a whole new way. So let's get started here on the home page. So this is the home page. If you've logged into BNI Connect, you should recognize this. And what I'd like to do is to just kind of go over a couple of details about this home page. This is really where all of the day-to-day activity happens. So you see up here we have a thing called My BNI Business, and this is the My BNI Business Report. Essentially, it's our stats. And even if you've never used the online slips, if you're a veteran member of 10 years, but you've all been doing it on paper, this should still be pretty much filled out with the information. So it gives you your referrals received, your thank you for closed business, referrals given, visitors, one-to-one, CEUs. That's all the same as if you were to look at the chapters PALMS report. However, there is one number in here that is unique to BNI Connect, and that is revenue received to my business. And that's essentially how much money did I make through BNI referrals. And this number is only accessible if you start using the online slips, because what we'll do is we'll just keep a running total of all of the thank you for closed business slips you put in, and we'll keep that information for you privately. Nobody else can see that information, so that is exclusive just to you. One other thing to keep in mind is because these are the official statistics, they will only be updated after your weekly meetings. So when you input a slip in BNI Connect, you're essentially queuing it up for the report for this week's meeting. So for example, I'm a member, by the way. I've been a member since 2002. My meeting is on Thursday this week. So if I had a referral for somebody and I put that into BNI Connect today, or I had a one-to-one with somebody and I put that into BNI Connect, that will basically save up that credit, that slip for this week's meeting. After I announce it at the meeting and after the vice president goes back and marks attendance and everything, then all of these numbers, these official numbers, will change. Now, if you'd like to know the details of these numbers, you can click on the My Personal Participation Report here at the top. And this will give you a week by week of what you've done in BNI. So what's been recorded for you if you've been using the paper slips, or what you've input. So just to go across the top here, A is your attendance. So P is present, A is absent, L is late, M is medical leave, and S is a substitute. So you can see week by week what your attendance was. Now the R's across here, we have 4 columns for R's. We have R stands for referral. Then we have RG and RR. RG is referrals given, and RR is referrals received. Then for each one, we have I and O, which stands for inside and outside. So every referral is a two-way relationship. So if I give a referral to somebody, there's somebody on the other side that has received that referral. An inside versus an outside referral. So an inside referral is when 2 members do business with each other. In other words, we're keeping the referral, we're keeping the relationship within BNI. So in other words, if I decide to use the mortgage broker in my chapter because I would like to get my house refinanced, that would be an inside referral. I am using somebody's services in my chapter. If I refer my brother-in-law to the real estate agent because he's thinking about moving into the area and buying a house, that would be an outside referral because I've introduced somebody from outside of our network to somebody in my group. V stands for how many visitors I've brought to the meeting. One-to-ones are meetings I've had with other members. Thank you for closed business is if somebody gives me a referral and that turns into money for my business, I recognize that person. So this is when other people recognize me for generating business for them. And finally, we have the CEUs. For example, today is worth 1 continuing education unit. So Lisa had a quick question. I've already submitted a thank you for closed business on a paper slip at the meeting. So the only way you could correct that is if you wanted to talk with your vice president and ask them to please remove that from the report and then going in and submitting an electronic slip. Does that make sense, Lisa? Does that help? So the ones that you've received from others will automatically appear in here. The only one that wouldn't show up is the revenue received to my business if you turned it in on paper. Does that make sense, Lisa? All right. Yep, so Lisa, if they turned it in on paper, that should show up as thank you for closed business, thanking you for business, which means if you go to this personal POMS report, this my participation report, that's what would show up in this thank you for closed business column. That figure should be in, one of those recent weeks when they turned it in, whatever week they turned it in. If it's not showing up there, then that's something that you need to talk with your vice president about. Either they haven't submitted that report yet, or for some reason it was overlooked. All right, thank you, Lisa. All right, also on this report is a summary of your attendance, members that you've sponsored, and what trainings you've taken recently. All right, so that is the report here. So Dan says, so these electronic web-based records are separate from the papers turned into the VP. Yes, so this actually replaces the paper. So instead of turning in a piece of paper, you could turn in an electronic slip, which also means that we are developing an app that should be out really soon. If you decide to turn it in on the app, that counts as an electronic slip, which means that you don't necessarily have to turn the paper slip in anymore. Does that make sense, Dan? And Dan, a VP would not have to delete it unless somebody just found out about the electronic slips and wanted to enter it here for record keeping, but had already entered it previously. Stephanie says, does inside mean within my chapter or all of BNI? So there's different interpretations of that. I would definitely talk with your executive director because some of these definitions are done, I guess, locally within the region. And as long as you're being consistent within the region, my opinion is it's whenever any two members do business with each other because the relationship started with and stayed within the BNI system. But again, that's my interpretation of it, and that's how we do that here. If you're in Minnesota or Florida or California or India or Canada, you may do things slightly differently. Does that help, Stephanie? Right. So Stephanie, I would check with your director consultant comes to your chapter probably every 4 to 6 weeks. Talk with your director consultant and ask them what they think. All right. And Tatiana, if you don't mind, I'm going to hold off on your question until the end because that's a very complicated subject. Okay. All right. So submitting the slips, again, it's very, very easy. It's all right here, these top 4 options here. So if you give me a second, I actually need to switch screens here for a second, and I need to come over to my test system. As I said, I am a member, so we were just looking at my regular home screen, but I need to actually go into this test system so I don't mess up my own stats. But here we go. These 4 options here at the top are submitting the various types of slips. We have 4 types of slips: a thank you for closed business, a referral, a one-to-one, and a CEU. Once we turn them in, we also have the ability to review those slips and all of the details. When people give you referrals in BNI Connect, you can also track those referrals in BNI Connect. And if you'd still like to use paper, we can print out those slips before we go to the meeting if we'd like to. So let's take a look at how that works. So first thing, let's say that we have a referral for somebody. We can go in and submit a referral slip. And hopefully this looks familiar. This is really the exact same format as the paper slips that we would have at a meeting. So all you need to do is select the person from your chapter. So let's say we have Ron Cowie. He is the photographer in my chapter. And I know that my mother was looking to get some new headshots for her business card. So I'm going to put her in here. Janet Walsh is the referral. I gave my mother his card. They live at 1 Here Street in Thareville. And the phone number, email address, and any comments. I can then rate that referral on a scale of 1 to 5. I'm going to call this one a 4. Now I can either do submit and new, which means I'm going to pass this slip in and immediately go to a blank one so I can put another one in, or I can just click submit and it will just turn this one slip in. And that's pretty much all there is to it, turning in a referral. Now the nice thing is that when you turn in a paper slip at a meeting, you're handing it over and pretty much that information goes away. When you start using the slips online, now I can go back and review that information later. So here we have review my referral slip. So as soon as I turn that in, I can go to review my referral slips and I should see this referral to Ron Cowie, referred Janet Walsh. It was an outside referral. I gave the card, the phone number, the email. So all of this information that normally would be lost as soon as I turned it in. Now the slip will be sent. So what happens is Ron gets an email immediately with all of this information. So Ron will have basically a notification saying, hey, guess what, Ron? You have a new referral. And here's all the information about that referral. So here's actually an example. So this is a referral that I actually just received a few days ago on March 7th. It was an inside referral because one of the members of my chapter referred themselves to me. They gave me their contact information, and down at the bottom it also has my referral partner's contact information, which just happens to be the same person in this case. The nice thing about that is that the people can start working on it immediately. Now, as far as this information goes, all of this detail, only you and your referral partner can see all of that detail. Now, your vice president, they will get to see it because it gets put into the POMS report, but the only thing they'll see is that I have a referral given and Ron Cowie has a referral received. They do not see any of the details. They don't see the client name. They don't see the phone numbers. They don't see anything else. So Dan, does that answer your 2 questions that you just had? Where does the slip go, and then who gets to see it? Excellent. And Sandeep, you had asked how can I add a referral slip if I'm working together with a person in my contact sphere? Not sure what you mean by that, but I mean, that would just be if you're referring that client that you might be working with over to another person in your contact sphere. That's just a regular referral. Again, that's the beauty of BNI. You would just click submit a referral slip and you would refer that person to the other person in your chapter. Or if it happens to be somebody in your contact sphere, but it may be somebody that's in another chapter, you can even search cross-chapter. You can only refer right now to other people in your region. Right, so if you have a project and you have a client that you're working with and you bring in a designer and then you bring in a, marketing person and a web developer and all of that, then you would just keep referring this person to the other people in your group. And if you do make a cross-chapter referral, then they will, doesn't matter, they'll get a notification as well. And what will happen is you'll get the referral given in your report. They will still get a referral given in their report and vice versa. And yes, you are limited to only people within your region. All right, so Robert just has a comment that there is a cutoff time to the slips. So again, my meeting, right, it's on Thursday. And our meeting goes from 7 to 8:30. So everything that is entered, that I enter into BNI Connect or I put into the app or whatever else, everything that gets put in up until 8:30 a.m. will count towards this week's meeting. At 8:31 a.m., anything I enter goes towards the next week's meeting. So right at 8:31, it starts applying to next week. So if you want it to count for this week's progress report, you need to make sure that you put it in before the end of the meeting. So thanks for that reminder, Robert. All right, and Tanya, yes, it is limited to this region, but you do have to, you can only get credit for it in the region, but you can make relationships with people around the world and still pass the business. Right now, we just can't get credit for it, but that's coming. That should be coming towards the end of the year. Dan says, is that time deadline automatic? And yes, it is automatic based on what BNI Connect is told your meeting times are. Okay, awesome. You guys have some great questions today. That's awesome. All right, so that's a referrals, one-to-ones, right? We have the one-to-one slips. So we had a meeting with somebody. Let's just look at how this cross-chapter works. Let's say that I have a meeting with somebody in another chapter within my region. I can record that. So I have a guy, he's in a similar industry. I meet with him all the time. His name is Dave Cordero. Now in BNI Connect, I can never remember whether it's Dave or David. So I'm just going to put the first couple of letters of his name in. And same thing with his last name. It's Cordero. I don't know if it's I-E or E-I, so I'm just going to put, Core for first couple of letters. The less you put in, the more you'll find in the search. So I do recommend putting in less, because if I had put in Dave here, it wouldn't have found him when he is actually in the system under David, right? So I'm going to choose David. Now he will be my one-to-one partner here. I can put in the place that we had the one-to-ones. Let's call that Starbucks. Topics of conversation, new mutual projects, and the date that we had our one-to-one. Other things to keep in mind along Dan's point earlier, or was it Dan or Robert's point earlier, is that if you backdate a one-to-one, let's say I forgot to put a one-to-one from 3 weeks ago in, it's still going to apply to this week's meeting. All right, and again, I can hit submit or save a new if I have multiple one-to-ones to record. And of course, now this will appear in my one-to-one slip. So now, and it does not matter who's listed in the invited by, both people get credit for the one-to-one. And if my friend Dave tries to put another one-to-one in for the same date, he'll get a warning saying, this is already existing in the system. Please don't duplicate it. But again, I can review my one-to-ones. And now the cool thing about this is it's not just, I had, 25 one-to-ones this year. Yeah, but if I need to make sure that I'm having one-to-ones with the right people as well, that I'm really looking to really work my close network and meet often with the people that are in my contact sphere. So now I can see, who am I having a lot of one-to-ones with? I'm having a ton of one-to-ones with Stephen Schwartz here. I've met with Dave a number of times, but what if there's people in my contact sphere that I should be doing a lot of business with, but they're missing? Well, that'll help me to strategize my one-to-ones going into the future. And yes, both people will see. So David will see this one-to-one in his list as well. So, and he will get the credit for that one-to-one in his chapter. So both people get credit for a one-to-one. All right, the next thing is when somebody has given you a referral and it turns into business for your business, make sure that you submit a thank you for closed business slip for that. So let's say that Greg had passed me a referral that resulted in $1,500 to my business. And this was either new business or repeat business. Repeat business would be, if he's a client that's on, let's say, a monthly contract, I would put in every month the amount of money that is incoming to my business. Tier 1 would be one of those inside referrals. Tier 2 would be an outside referral. Now the Tier 3 means that would be somebody that Greg referred to me that then referred me to somebody else. So that somebody else would be the third tier, but it traces back to Greg, so I make sure I thank him for that. The comments are private to you, so nobody else sees the comments. You can write whatever you want in here. So let's say that this was for, referred me to Tom Smith for a new computer and consulting. Right, and I can click Save and New if I have, let's say I'm going through my QuickBooks once a month and I'm just entering all my thank you for closed business, or I can click Submit just to submit this very one. And again, now that's going to go into my thank you for closed business slips. By the way, you're not locked into only looking at this date range. This is showing me the last 6 months by default, but I could actually go back to, let's say, 2010, even before I started using these online slips, and I can basically go and review every single thank you for closed business slip that I've turned in, which is telling me a really important thing. Basically, where's the money coming from? Who should I make sure that I'm thanking for providing the food that I put on my table? So, I mean, I can sort this by the amount and see who's giving me the biggest referrals. I could sort this by thank you to see, go down the list and see, how many referrals people are turning into me. So there's lots of ways to really dive deep with this particular report. And the only things that are listed in any of these reports are slips that you turn in electronically yourself. So if you're turning in a piece of paper, these review reports will be completely empty because the vice president is only entering in the statistics into the spreadsheet, not all of the details. And by the way, nobody else can see any of the details of your thank you for closed business. All right, the final one is CEUs, and I do see a couple more questions there by Robert and Brian, and I will make sure I get to those. We only have a couple minutes till the bottom of the hour, so I want to make sure I get through the rest of this content. This is the continuing education units or the chapter education units, and make sure that you go in if you want to do that right now and give yourself 1 credit for today's webinar so that you have that credit. And of course, that has a CEU report along with it. Now, if you do want to make sure that you turn in paper at the meeting, like, for example, if you want to be included in the door prize drawing, just go to print your weekly slips, and this will print out this week's worth of activity. And you'll see here that the referral slips are, when I click the print button here, the referral slips will be about the same shape and size as a regular referral. So you can see it has enough also for a referral reality check. So it has who my referral was. Here's the one I just turned in. Those were from a previous test a couple of days ago. But we have my referral to Ron Cowie from me, and the referral was my mother. The rest of the information down here, because you're not turning that in for the door prize, it's just here to be able to organize it so that you can read it very easily at the meeting. So I have my thank you for closed business, my one-to-ones, and my CEUs. Now, of course, there is also the received referrals report. So as people are sending you electronic referrals, you can go in and review those referrals that have been sent to you. So you never have to worry about losing a piece of paper again. It's all here within BNI Connect. All right, so we are at the bottom of the hour already. Man, these half hours fly. That said, I am willing to stay here and answer all of your questions. We have about 4 questions that are lined up. I will answer every single one of those. If any of you do need to leave right away, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. A good referral for me is to please, if you feel that these are helpful, to please recommend them to other people in your chapter and in your area. So let me go and start answering some of these questions. So starting up here, Dan says, did the comments show up on the report anywhere? And again, the comments only show up on this report. Let me show you what the vice president sees, because you guys, I know you're very curious about that. So I'm going to bump back over to the live system here, and let me go to my own chapter and show you guys what a vice president sees when they're entering stuff into BNI Connect. All right, so let me look at the POMS reports here. So, for example, they completed these past POMS. This is the report that's being created for this week as people are submitting activity. So if I click on the report, there's all this activity has already been entered. So this, again, this makes my vice president's life a lot easier. All they have to do is really to take attendance because everything else is entered. But I can click here. There's this thing called the SLIPS audit report. And this shows the vice president all of that activity that were entered. And you can see here that the details are kept private. All they can see, for example, is that David Nichols in my chapter had a one-to-one with Elliot Granville. Kelly Gormley gave a referral to James Lazaridis, and it was herself, a tier 1 referral. Right? We have, for the thank you for closed business, all we can see is who's getting credit for generating business. We can't see who actually received the business because that is private. All right, so I think that answers a couple of questions out there in regarding that information, right? So the comments basically don't show up anywhere publicly. They are kept private to you. Ray says, do I need to do a paper slip and an electronic one? No, you only need to do an electronic slip. If you want to wave the piece of paper around at the chapter, that's fine. You can do that. If you want to turn it in for the door prize, you can do that. But again, that's not necessary. If you put it in electronically and you forget to print it out and you use a regular slip, the only thing I say is to put an X through it so that they know whether or not it was already entered electronically. Does that answer your question, Ray? Tanya says, how can you tell if a thank you for closed business has been submitted by another person for a referral you have given? The answer to that one is you don't. Again, because it needs to be kept confidential, the only way that you can know that information is if they announce it at the meeting. Now, one thing I didn't get into today is that there is the ability to track your received referrals. So if you give a referral to somebody and they go in and track their referral, which they can do by going in here and they get these referrals. So I got that referral from Shannon. I can now go in and edit this referral, and I know that this referral closed. I can mark this referral as closed, and on her referrals given report, she would see that I marked that as closed, which means that most likely I have turned in the thank you for closed business, even though, again, that is not 100% shown. Does that make sense, Tanya? So, and again, that is how on the referral reports, review my referral slips and the received referrals. That's how you mark that as the status from new to open to closed. And again, that Shannon Rebello one right here, Shannon Rebello, that is now marked as closed, which means in her given report, it will also show closed. Ray says, how often should I do one-to-ones? I would say at least one-to-one per week. And if you can do more than that, if you can do 2 or 3 one-to-ones per week, that will really boost your membership. You know, we have very little time to learn about what people do and what they're all about and what kind of person they are just from the 45 or 50 or 60 seconds that you get in the meeting, and maybe a couple of minutes in open networking, and maybe a couple of 10-minute presentations once or twice a year. Really the way that you get to know people is through those one-to-ones. So a minimum of one-to-one per week, but if you can do 2 or 3 or even 4, that'll really help to boost those relationships. All right, so Tatiana says, financial services. So how do you record thank you for closed business for financial services? That one is a sticky wicket. So here's what I'll tell you. General rule of thumb, okay? General rule of thumb is that what you're recording is the gross receipts to your company. Gross receipts to your company. So, for me in the computer industry, most of what I do is consulting and maybe some computer sales. Basically, whatever invoice I send to my client, that's going to be what I report, is whatever I write on that invoice. Now, banking and loans and things like that, I know with financial advisors and banking, it gets really tricky. There is a guide to this, and the place to find that guide, click on this question mark in the upper right-hand corner of BNI Connect. That's going to take you over to the help site. Click this question mark. That will take you to the help site. And hold on a second. I was in the test system. Oh, give me 1 second. Let me get to the right place here. Oh, looks like my support site is having an issue at the moment. So normally it is, let me see if I can get there here. Nope, looks like Zendesk is having an issue at the moment. But on the support site, I do have an article that explains how to calculate it out for basically financial services and places like that. So I know that was kind of a work around that issue. If you want to, shoot me an email, support@bniconnect.com, and I can send you that document. So Dan said the ones submitted online, the referrals received. So yes, those, again, the only referrals that your referral partner has submitted online themselves by clicking on submit a referral slip will appear in your received referrals. So Dan says, are the amounts for thank you for closed business cumulative from all those who made referrals? Yes. So like if you look at your personal participation report, if I look at, let's say this week where I had $3,993 in thank you for closed business, that could be one person thanking me for $3,993, or that could be 10 people each thanking me for approximately $400 worth of business. Could be one person that thanked me for $2,000 and 10 people that thank me for $200 a piece. I have no idea. Again, that part of it's anonymous, and it's done that way intentionally for privacy reasons. Does that make sense, Dan? Is that what you were asking? Robert says, on a tier 3 referral, are you to let the member within your chapter know that they have a referral to enter? Yes, that's kind of the only way they would find out about that. Now, normally we don't necessarily track them as referrals given and received, just the thank you for closed business part of it, because in reality, it's the other person that referred you, which is what makes it a tier 3. But if it wasn't for that first relationship, that money stems back to the original referral. So, generally speaking, we're not recording it as a referral. We're just recording the thank you part of it. Does that make sense, Robert? So Brian says, so if I get a new client via BNI and I do work for that client in April and then again in September, I need to be sure I enter the September invoice amount as the source of that client was BNI. Yes, absolutely. So like my business, we do a ton of recurring business. I mean, that's the base of my business is managed services. So, when I get a client, I tend to get a client for life. And every quarter, we're sending them another invoice. So every quarter, I need to make sure that I go into BNI Connect, and for all of the people that referred me business, I need to go in and submit thank you for closed business for each one of those clients. Does that make sense, Brian? Does that help? So my suggestion on that is to, in whatever accounting software you use, like I use QuickBooks. So in my QuickBooks, under each client, I put in what their referral source was, and I'll put in the member of BNI that referred me to them, so I can very quickly run a QuickBooks report that tells me all my BNI referrals on a monthly and quarterly basis. Cool. So yeah, if you can do it right from the beginning, it makes it really easy going forward. So yes, the original referral source receives that credit for that third, fourth, fifth, 10th tier referral. So Karen says, thank you. Your presentations are direct and clear. Thank you so much, Karen. That's a very nice compliment. I appreciate that. All right, I think we're at the bottom of the questions list. Does anybody have any other questions? Any other questions at all? I'd be happy to answer those questions. As I said, this is what I do all day, every day. I talk about BNI Connect. I answer questions about BNI Connect. So, I think we're at about quarter of the top of the hour, so 15 minutes to the top of the hour. And again, I'm always happy to stay on these calls, whether it's for an extra 2 minutes or an extra 20 minutes. I've been, I think, on some calls as long as an extra, I think 40 minutes was the record. But today it looks like this is where we have answered all of the questions. So thank you guys so much for being here with me today, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Tomorrow's webinar would be a good referral for me. So if you happen to know anybody that needs to learn more about how to utilize BNI Connect to connect with other people around the world, that would be a good webinar to refer them to, is tomorrow's webinar, Connecting with Other Members, at the same time slot, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. In the meantime, thank you guys so much and happy connecting.